Welcome to our kitchen. I'd like to take you step by step through my process of making kombucha. This film is inspired by our friend Jane, who wanted me to make a film especially for her, but I'm sharing it with everybody. I'm going to include the recipe in one of the segments of the film, and we'll follow through the recipe as we look through step one, making the kombucha. We have to combine the tea with the sugar mixture. So we're going to start by boiling up 1.5 quarts of water, and to that we're going to add 10 tea bags of organic black tea. We can use any kind of tea. If you buy your tea in bulk, the equivalent is going to be 3.5 tablespoons of black tea. So what I've done, I've taken the wrapping off of all these tea bags, 10 tea bags, and I've added, for a little bit of flavor, you can omit this or add different types of tea, or you can use green tea instead of the black tea. So what I'm going to do is take these combinations, hook them together with a little plastic clamp, and then drop them in the pot of water that has been boiling. We'll make sure that's off, and we're gonna just put our tea bags in there for 10 minutes, and then we'll set the timer and stop the process. So now we're just dunking all the tea bags to make sure that they're soaking. We'll check back in a few minutes and keep dipping them. I'm gonna set my timer now. Step 2 is to dissolve the sugar, and I like to, when I can, use raw cane sugar, and if it's organic, all the better. And we're going to add 2 cups of the cane sugar to this gallon vessel, and we're going to mix it up. Now remember, when you're starting, this recipe calls for a finished product of a 2-gallon dispenser. You may want to start off slow in a smaller dispenser, like this is a gallon, for instance. You may want to start off, in which case, just use half of the ingredients that are listed for the 2-gallon recipe. So we'll put the sugar in. And let that dissolve. We can come back while this is steeping and agitate the mixture until you've got a clear solution. So we finished part 2 in the step 1 process, that is dissolve sugar in 3 quarts of water. Again, if you're using a smaller dispenser, it'd be 1.5 quarts. So now we're going to wait for the tea to cool. So I'm going to wait for my timer to go off and then set it out on this cold fall day where it's 32 degrees outside. Now the sugar water and tea solutions have cooled down to room temperature, and we're ready to add that to the dispenser. Here's my dispenser. It's a 2-gallon dispenser, and this has been sitting in the closet for the past 3 months. In the dark, and it's always had a little coat of water on the top so it doesn't dry out. So let's examine what this SCOBY is. SCOBY is a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast that's important in the fermentation process of the tea. And when we make the kombucha, we're going to undergo 2 fermentations. The first one is with the tea for about 10 days. And the second one, when you add your juices or fruits, that's probably another 3 days. And we'll talk about that later. But let's take a closer look at this jellyfish / mushroom SCOBY. Here's my container, 2-gallon dispenser. What we do, since it's been in the closet for several months, 3 months, I'm going to rinse out the SCOBY and rinse out the dispenser before I add my sugar water and tea. And you can, well, you can't smell it, but if you could, it's very vinegary. So what we'll do is dump it into a bowl, and then we'll rinse it out thoroughly with tap water. So here it is birthing out of the container. And you'll find that when you use the SCOBY, you'll see that it will grow to the shape of your container, as this has over time. So we're going to run some tap water through here, let it rinse for a few minutes. Make sure that all that acidic fermentation products are gone before we start a fresh batch. Now the SCOBY, you can see, is separated into different layers. I'll end up putting this whole thing back through. Not to worry, because you can filter your product after it's done fermenting. But you want to examine your SCOBY before you use it and over time. If you ever see any unusual protuberances of different types of organisms, maybe a big white mound of something, you might be able to cut it off, as I have in the past, and keep your SCOBY going. But don't use it if it has a sort of peculiar growth to it. See if you can cut it off, cut off a section, and put this SCOBY back to work. I think it's pretty well cleaned out. Now I've got to clean out my dispenser. In the meantime, we'll keep the SCOBY in the bowl until it's time to add that after our sugar water and tea are added to the container. Then we'll add this. It's been about 5 minutes, and I'm going to dunk these tea bags another time, up and down. My daughter started me on this whole project. She gave me a SCOBY, and I started off small in a container about this size, one gallon container. And it progressed to moving to a 2-gallon dispenser. And typically I end up, after all the steps, with about 9 or 10 liters of finished product. And that keeps me in stock for a long time, because I use only 3 ounces a day with my daily vitamins. It's tempting to gulp this stuff, but if you knew how hard it is to make, you're going to use it sparingly. And it is pretty sweet, so you don't want to overload on it. You can buy these small SCOBY packages online or at your co-op perhaps. All right, we've let the tea cool down to room temperature. And I've pulled out the tea bags, and I'm going to just squeeze them so that all that tea is going to end up in the mix. Now we're going to add the tea with the sugar mixture to the dispenser, which has been cleaned out. Make sure your handle's closed when you do this. There's the tea. Here's the sugar mixture. Gently place this into the container. Don't worry about all these little gooey tentacles that are here. We can filter those out later. So we'll try to carefully introduce this back into the dispenser, which is a little difficult because this thing is very slippery, slimy. But here we go. I'll tilt the dispenser and just let it jump in there. And lastly, we will add some tap water to bring this up to the top. Now you have to be careful when you fill this up and watch the dispenser as it sits in the corner for 10 days because the SCOBY may grow and some of the liquid may be pouring out. Now rather than putting on a lid and screw it on tight, I'm going to just wet this towel because we want air to get to it. But we also want to keep it in the dark at room temperature. So I'm just going to set this aside on the kitchen counter away from any direct sunlight. I've been doing this for a long time and I know that this mixture will be ready in about 10 days. So what I'm going to do, take today's date, add 10 days to it, and with a piece of masking tape I'm going to put on the dispenser ready on November 21, which is 10 days from today. We'll use pH paper to be sure that we've got the right pH, which is going to be anywhere from 2.5 to 3. So there's nothing more to do except put that wet towel on, gently put the lid on, not screwed on, and just slide it into the corner. Here's my recipe that we just talked about. You can pause the video and take a screenshot if you'd like to print out the recipe. We're now at part 2 of the recipe. That is the second fermentation. We can see that the mixture has been sitting for 10 days. Here's my reminder. And now we're going to test for pH. You can see along here all the bubbles here, and if I mix it, you can see that lots of bubbles come up from this, from the fermentation. So what we'll do is take a piece of pH paper, and this is the specially acidic paper for kombucha, less than 4.5, and I'll try to match the color with the guide. And you can see that it's lighter than 3.5. Right about 3.0, hasn't quite turned orange yet. So this is about exactly what you want for the booch. And if you do this a couple times with the pH paper, because it's expensive, you just know with my recipe here, 10 days is what works and I don't need the pH paper. But if you are doing this for the first time, you want to monitor that. Here's what we're going to use for the sugar for the second fermentation. This is mango orange gourmet nectar, one of my favorites. I can find this at Ocean State Job Lot, and another one is another fruit juice, super fruit, with all kinds of fruit juices. Today I'm going to use mango and fresh apple cider. What I like about these nectars, they give a little bit more body to the kombucha. So what I'm going to do, this is 34 ounces. I'm going to use about 5 ounces of the liquid, pour it into these kombucha bottles with a stopper, 5 ounces each, so maybe 6 bottles, and then I'll add the kombucha. I'm going to shake up the bottles to make sure it's all mixed in. Use a small funnel. This last bottle had just a little bit of juice into the container, so I added an extra couple ounces here to make it a little richer. So I ended up with 5 bottles. Now we're going to start pouring off the second fermentation. And again, it's on a raised pot. Put this down below, funnel. And you want to leave a little bit of space at the top there. Then I'll gently invert it to have the juices all mix up. And these bottles will be lined up on the counter away from the light for 2 to 3 days. For the next flavor, I'm going to add some local apple cider, fresh. I'm going to use a cup this time. This helps stretch out the liquid so that you end up with more than 8-liter bottles because you're adding all this liquid. Some people use fruit, in which case most of that fruit gets strained out and you still have to add a lot of the liquid. As you can see now, the apple cider and the mango look very similar side by side. So if it's important to you, you can label your different bottles. But in my case, it doesn't really matter. It's all delicious. As we get closer to the end, we want to take out the SCOBY so it doesn't clog up the dispenser arm here. And we'll take that out now, and for the last few bottles, we'll use a filter that has a little screen in it, a little mesh screen. We're going to tilt this and extract this mushroom jellyfish monster from its home. Even if a few squids of the SCOBY get into your mixture, it doesn't matter. It's all good for you. Swallow it. Kind of like an oyster, maybe. I've never had one, but I suppose that's what it must be like. When I'm getting close to the bottom, I want to just pour all this off to make sure I've got enough for another liter bottle. So I'll pour it into a quart measuring container, and it's a little less than a quart, but I'm still going to be able to fill one more bottle because I've got a cup of this cider. I'm going to use the filter because there are a bunch of little tentacles floating around in here. I've ended up with 10 liters and I've got this much left, and rather than waste it, I'll put a little bit into this pint-sized kombucha bottle with extra cider in it and see what happens. So that's it. And I'll put all these bottles against the back counter, away from the light, clean up all my glassware, clean up the SCOBY, put the SCOBY back into the dispenser, put it in the closet, make sure there's enough water covering the top of the SCOBY. You can buy these glass stoppered bottles on Amazon. This was a package of 8. It included some extra stoppers, some decanting mechanism for olive oil or some such thing, and funnels. And this was less than $4 per bottle. These are handy too if you can find these for transporting your booch. What to do with these empty bottles? Store your tree nuts for good health, good colon health. Or you could ferment some of the booch in here if you don't have enough of those liter bottles. You can get these 1 gallon or 2 gallon dispensers online, or I saw one of these at Wally World, a 2 gallon size, for $24 or something. It might seem complicated at first, but once you do it a couple times, you'll have a routine and you'll know what steps to skip. So good luck with your recipes and good health. I usually take a sip of kombucha, maybe 3 ounces or so, with my morning vitamin D. It's tempting just to drink it fast, but it is very sugary, so take your time and just enjoy the benefits of good gut health in small doses. It's been about 4 days since the start of the second fermentation, and these bottles have been kept in the dark, room temperature, And you can see maybe some of them have started to bubble up. So the next thing we're going to do is just test them to see if they've got any burp. I've been doing that every couple of days, and every once in a while I hear a little pop. You hear that little pop there. So now I'll collect these and put them in the fridge. First they'll go outside in the cold weather, then to the fridge. After a while, because I don't use these up very quickly, just a couple ounces every day, when these have been sitting in the refrigerator for quite a while, the tendency is for them to just be very bubbly. So in order not to have them bubble over on the older bottles, I'll put them in something like this and then open them. It will bubble up and you won't lose the booch. You'll end up in the container.